Hello again, gamers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Captain, and today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 Rebel ships for Star Wars Armada. Now, I'm a big fan of Star Wars Armada. I did do a review of it on my channel back in the day, and I've also done a full battle report of Rebels versus Imperial. Rebels is the faction I play the most, though I have fully collected every ship available for both Rebels and Imperial, the classic factions as you were. And you know what, right now, since it looks like they're probably not going to be doing any new ships or any new ships for a while for the two original factions, the Rebels and the Imperium, I thought it was a good time to count down my favorite ships. So I am also going to be doing a countdown, a top 10 countdown of my favorite Imperial ships as well. That'll be coming soon, so look for that. But without any further ado, I'm going to be getting into my top 10 favorite Rebel ships. And to be clear, I love all 12 ships that are currently available for the Rebel faction, and I would use all of them for different circumstances and for different sorts of list building. It's just that, generally speaking, these are the 10 I like the most, the ones I'm most likely to use, the ones I have the most uses for. So I'm going to run you down my top 10 favorite Rebel ships, and I'm going to tell you why I like them, or maybe some configurations I like, or certain upgrades I like for them, and why they're cool. All right, so without any further ado, let's get to my number 10. Number 10. So my number 10 is the Starhawk. Now this is the largest Rebel ship. This thing has 14 hull, 6 shields on the front, 4 on each side and 2 on the rear. This is a better statted ship than even an Imperial Star Destroyer. It's somewhere between like an Imperial Star Destroyer and a Super Star Destroyer. You've got 8 dice on the front, you've got 5 dice on the sides, 3 sides dice on the rear, regardless of which version you use. My favorite version to use is the Mark 1. Now the reason I like the Mark 1 is it has some really awesome, and I do mean awesome, titles that it can take that the Mark II cannot use. So the first one I want to talk about is the Amity. So the Amity, first off, allows you to get an evade token, which you may be thinking, oh, evade token, who cares about an evade token? But this thing has a lot of red dice. I mean, a ludicrous amount of red dice. And if you take the Amity title for only 6 points, by the way, which is fairly affordable for what is normally an incredibly expensive ship, and you take the Amity title, you then can take turbo laser reroute circuits, which is a phenomenal upgrade that allows you to exhaust a evade token to switch a die to either a crit hit or a double hit side, a red die, every time you fire off with those red dice. Getting to do that with one of your dice that was a total miss is amazing. You don't need to use the evade on specifically on actually evading enemy hits. This is a fantastic title. Also, the other Mark 1 only title that there is the Concorde. Now the Concorde is another one that's really good, and again can only be taken by the Mark 1. And it allows you to gain a salvo token. Now, throwing a salvo on a Starhawk Mark 1 who has 2 red and a black dice in the rear makes this, which it already is your biggest point sink in your force, because there's no way you have a more expensive ship in your force if you're taking a Starhawk. It makes it dangerous for your enemy to shoot at, because you have, in addition to having a brace and a contain and a salvo of its own, you now have a second salvo. Being able to get an extra salvo token makes it scary dangerous for your enemy to try to gang up on, because you have the ability to salvo at enemy fire twice before even risking losing one of your salvo tokens. And those 2 red dice, being able to hit people all the way out to long range, if they get close, 2 red dice and a black die, is actually pretty scary for a lot of smaller or medium-sized ships to be taking. That kind of thing can really chip away at shields. The Starhawk is a beast. If you're looking to run a Rebel fleet with an enormous ship that is really difficult to bring down, then the Starhawk is your ship, and that's why it is my number 10 favorite Rebel ship. Number 9. My number 9 favorite Rebel ship is the MC-30. Now, the MC-30 is a very fast, small, Mon Calamari ship. It is anything with the MC is a Mon Calamari ship. That's the race of people, of course, that Admiral Akbar and Admiral Aratus were. This is the smallest of their ships, but this is a small ship with a big punch. Now, my favorite version is the MC-30C torpedo frigate, because this thing really focuses in on what the MC-30 is best at, which is coming in close and unloading on your opponent. Now, the big differences between the MC-30 torpedo frigate and its alternate version is that this one has a lot of blue dice along with black dice, whereas the alternate version of the MC-30 has red dice with the black dice, which is a little weird because red dice are great for hitting at very long range, but this thing is super fast. It can move 4 distances per turn on the measuring ruler, and being able to move that fast, you want to use it to get in point blank as quickly as possible. It's much better to have close range and medium range dice, in my opinion, especially since the blue dice have a lot more of those accuracy sides, so you can lock up your opponent's defensive tokens before unloading on them with black dice. And now, how do I usually like to use the torpedo frigate? So first off, I want to start with its title. Now, it has a couple of titles, and both of them are good, but in my opinion, the one that is really good for the MC-30 torpedo frigate is Farsight. So the thing about this that makes it so good is it says when you resolve the evade defense effect, you can affect an additional die. Now, this has just got even better because they made evades better with the rules update, which is great. And then also, when you resolve the redirect defense effect, you can choose 1 additional adjacent hull zone to suffer damage. So both of these make this ship significantly more likely to survive to get into point blank range, because that first turn where your opponent's going to shoot at it at long range before you shoot in to try to hit somebody at point blank range is going to make it really tough to kill it. Now, all else I would really give this is a external racks. 4 points for 1 shot, add 2 black dice is really great, especially since once you run into point blank range, if your opponent realizes how dangerous this thing is, while still being fairly fragile with only 4 hull and 3 shields around the front and sides and 2 on the rear, they're probably going to concentrate fire and try to tear it apart. So I'd rather take the external racks than take the upgrade that permanently gives you more black dice, either of the 2 upgrades that permanently give you more black dice. But also I would give it Ordnance Experts, because for only 4 points when attacking, you can re-roll up to 2 black dice. So what you do is for 1 turn, you hang back and get positioned to wait to shoot in for the kill. And on the second turn, once your opponents have come a little bit forward, you run in on the flank, and hopefully, if you can avoid being ganged up on by all your ships, you can use the torpedo frigate in concert with some of your ships that are further back, giving you covering fire to unload on an enemy ship and possibly bring it down. This thing can fire a ludicrous amount of firepower. If you can manage to get yourself, when you fly in, if you can get yourself in a position where on the beginning of turn 3 when you unload, because remember, you shoot before moving. So in the beginning of turn 3, after you shoot in and you can unload on them as long as you activate first, if you can double arc them, on the side you have 3 black dice and 2 blue dice. On the front, you have 2 black dice and a blue die. And on either one of those with your external racks, you can add 2 black dice. And then with the Ordnance Experts, again, when attacking, you get to re-roll up to 2 of the black dice, which you're going to get to use if you double arc them on either the front or the side or both. You could do ludicrous amounts of damage with this thing. And if it survives, it can even then go in behind the enemy ships of your opponent and go down the line and start tearing off the rear shields. This is a really good light ship. I like it a lot. I have had much occasion to use it, usually in a configuration similar to what I'm talking about right now. It is a really great way to shoot in point blank and be like, surprise, and just blow up enemy ships. A lot of fun, great ship to use, and I would highly recommend it. And that is why the MC-30 is my number 9 favorite Rebel ship for Star Wars Armada.
Number 8.
My number 8 favorite ship for the Rebels for Star Wars Armada is the MC-80, specifically the Liberty version. This is basically a Rebel version of an Imperial Star Destroyer. It's not quite as deadly as most of the versions of the Imperial Star Destroyer. It's got a little less generally on hull and a little less on firepower, but it's got that big front arc. Specifically, the MC-80 Star Cruiser version has 4 blue dice and 3 red dice in the front arc, while the MC Battle Cruiser version has 4 red dice and 3 blue dice. Now, the other big difference between the two of them is that the Battle Cruiser has 2 black dice on its anti-fighter, while the Star Cruiser has only 1 black die on its anti-fighter. Now, there's a few different ways to configure this that are really good, but generally speaking, these are really good for fleets where you're going to kind of aim straight at the enemy and you want to come at them and you want to hit them with lots of firepower. Similar to how Empire usually plays, because again, this does feel like a ship that is made very similar to a lot of the Star Destroyers. Both the Victory and Imperial Star Destroyer also go for a very similar sort of configuration. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite ways to generally configure it. And again, you can remove some of these upgrades if you like, add others in. And also, I didn't specifically put in any officers in this particular group of upgrades. But the first thing I recommend, and this is like an automatic must-take when taking the MC Liberty cruiser, is a gunnery team. Now, gunnery teams are fantastic, and the thing is, you've got a ship that is loaded up with red and blue dice, which means it's hitting at medium and long range, which means you're going to have multiple enemy ships in range of getting hit, at least with those red dice. Now, being able to spend a token to activate the gunnery team to fire twice out of the same arc, and it's that big arc with all those medium and long range dice and hit 2 different ships, is amazing. And this is definitely where you want that. And since you're doing that, why not take XI7 turbo lasers? Because this is great. So if the defender spends a defensive redirect token, they cannot suffer more than 1 damage in each hull zone other than the defending hull zone. So you can really tear off those front shields. And while you're at it, then why not add a spinal armament? So you get an extra red die. At that point, you really do have the amount of firepower that a Imperial Star Destroyer dishes out, which is insane. And for all this, I would give this particular version of the MC-80 Battlecruiser the title Endeavor, which says at the start of the first round, gain 1 contained defense token. So 1 extra contained defense token is a very good ability for only a 4-point title that is really, really nice. Not too bad. You can help you avoid those critical hits a little bit, especially since this is a fairly expensive ship, especially with all these upgrades. This is probably going to be one of, if not your most expensive ship in your force if you're taking it. Now, another title I want to talk about briefly with the MC-80 Star Cruiser is if you were taking a predominantly Mon Calamari based fleet, is the Mon Calamari Exodus fleet title. This is also a really fantastic title that you can take on your MC-80 either Star Cruiser or Battle Cruiser. Now, this title is for any Mon Calamari ship, so you'd probably be taking this along with an MC-30 or maybe an MC-75 or maybe the other version of the MC-80. But you got to take them in pairs, because what you do is you give this title, it's 5 points each, to 2 different Mon Calamari ships. And then, using an engineering token, you can choose and exhaust another copy of this card on a friendly ship at distance 1 to 4. And if you do, you gain 2 extra engineering points. This can be huge for bringing back shields, for repairing your ship. This can, I have played games where I have played as many as 4 Mon Calamari ships in a single fleet, of course using some MC-30s to keep the cost down. And using pairs of these, it can be very difficult to take out the bigger Mon Calamari ships. The MC-30s can still go down because they could go down to a single turn of fire, but things like MC-80s and MC-75s with the Mon Calamari Exodus fleet title on them are ludicrously difficult to take down unless your entire enemy's forces manages to get into range of the one ship and just unload on it. It takes multiple turns of sustained fire because the extra repair is just huge. Getting an extra point of shield back every time you do a engineering command can be really, really big. So all of that combined is why I really like the MC-80 Liberty style cruiser, either the Battle Cruiser or the Star Cruiser. They're both really good in my opinion. For slightly different reasons, but that is why they are my number 8 favorite Rebel ship for Star Wars Armada. Number 7. Now, my number 7 favorite ship for Star Wars Armada for the Rebel faction is the Assault Frigate Mark II, and specifically, it is the Mark II-B that I love and love so much. Now, the reason I love the B versus the A so much There's some significant differences between the two. First off, you get some extra squadron control. It goes all the way up to 3 squadron, which is really nice. And second off, it really focuses on those side arcs where the front arc has 1 less die. It only has 2 red dice in the front, but on the side you have 3 red dice and a blue dice for some amazing long-range broadsides on this ship. So the thing about this ship is I really like it for taking it with a specific admiral. And if you couldn't tell and you didn't know who that was, that's Admiral Akbar. Because Admiral Akbar is awesome. He says if you only fire out of your side arcs, you get 2 extra red dice. That's great. That's fantastic. At long range, you've already got 3 dice. You get Admiral Akbar. Now you're up to 5 red dice. That's a lot for what is a 72-point ship before you give it upgrades. That's really crazy. But then here's the thing. The Assault Frigate Mark II-B can take gunnery teams, which means you could fire twice out of that side and hit 2 different ships. It can also take enhanced armament, which means its side arcs can get 1 extra red die. This can get insane. So now I usually will take 2 of these and I'll equip them both with gunnery teams and enhanced armament and not even need a title. You can put a title on them if you want, but they don't even necessarily need one. Because with that and with Admiral Akbar, when they get those 2 shots each out of the side arcs, I mean, think about this. This is not a very expensive ship. At this point, total, you're at 89 points. That's not really that much for how much firepower you're about to put out. So you've got 3 red dice standard. You have a 4th red die because you have the enhanced armament. You have a 5th and a 6th red die because of Admiral Akbar, and then you get to fire that twice at 2 different ships out of your arc as you're flying sideways, keeping the distance from your enemy. This is really, really awesome. Now, if you want to add in some titles, there are some pretty awesome titles. So you've got Gallant Haven, which is a really good title that can help if you're also using this version to command fighters, which I often do because, like I said, it has more fighter control. Now, it says before a friendly squadron at distance 1 suffers damage from an attack, reduce the total of damage by 1. This is a really, really good title to give to one of your 2 Assault Frigate Mark IIs, because I usually take them in pairs, if you are going to be running fighters with that Assault Frigate. Now, the other one is Paragon. While attacking a ship you have already attacked this round, add 1 black die to your attack pool. Now, the cool thing about this is it's attacked this round, but it doesn't say by this ship, so you can have attacked it with another ship. You have the pair of them firing at 2 different ships. What you do is the first one fires at 2 different ships, the second one fires at the same 2 ships, and the second one's the Paragon. You get the extra black die, which can be even more devastating. The Assault Frigate Mark II-B is fantastic. There are some great ways to equip this. I absolutely love the Assault Frigate Mark II-B, especially when taking Admiral Akbar. I will often run Admiral Akbar in an MC-75 with a pair of these, one in front and behind, and they will conga line along and fire out ludicrous amounts of firepower at my enemy. And that is why it is my 7th favorite Rebel ship for Star Wars Armada.
Number 6.
My 6th favorite Rebel ship for Star Wars Armada is the GR-75 Medium Transport, or the GR-75 Combat Retrofit. See, the GR-75s are a flotilla. They are the smallest of capital ships, a pair of, ships that are too big to be fighters, too small to be capital ships on their own. But these are dirt cheap ships that you can use to command fighters and bombers and move around the battlefield with them. You can get a little crazy and give them lots of upgrades if you want, but often it's actually best to keep them fairly low on the upgrades and just have them command a bunch of fighters. So the thing is, they have a squadron stat of 2 and they can move up to 3 links. They also are the only type of capital ships, flotillas that being, that have a scatter token. Meaning that even though they don't have a lot of shields, 1 on each side, and they don't have a lot of hull, 3 hull total, that scatter token means when the big attack comes at them, at least once every round, possibly twice when they really need it, they can just avoid all that damage, which actually makes them rather difficult to bring down for such a cheap ship. And when I'm talking cheap, the cheaper version, the GR-75 Medium Transports, which literally has no firepower on its own except for anti-squadron, has a black anti-squadron die, has no fire against capital ships, is only 18 points on its own. It is the cheapest of all the capital ships from the Rebel or Imperial factions combined. From both of those factions, it is the cheapest ship. So crazy good. from the legacy factions. Now, if you do want to give it some upgrades, some great upgrades to possibly give it, first off, Bomber Command Center. Now, this is an 8-point upgrade. It's not that expensive, and it is very worthwhile if you are going to be running a GR-75 moving at 3 spaces, escorting some bombers in to attack a enemy capital ship on the flank, which is a very deadly strategy. And it says, while friendly squadrons with bomber at distance 1 to 5 are attacking a ship, it can reroll 1 die. A squadron cannot resolve more than 1 bomber command center per attack. Now, this is great. So you take this ship and you go around the flank with 3 bombers, because you can activate the 3rd bomber as long as you have banked a token. And when you come in, all 3 of those bombers come in and each one can re-roll a die. That's really awesome. Then, of course, another good affordable upgrade, expanded hangar bay, 5 points, increase the capacity of its squadron value by 1. So instead of a 2, now you have a 3, and if you've banked a token, you can control 4 bombers. And then finally, for its title, in my opinion, there's only one title you want to do with this, and that is Bright Hope. So while defending against an attack that does not target your rear hull zone, before you suffer damage, reduce the total damage by 1. Now, this is only a 2-point title, very affordable. Granted, if you take all 3 of these, you are going to jack up the cost of the GR-75 to 33 points, but this is a 33 points that actually still is very worthwhile. It's still a fairly affordable ship for how durable it is, and the fact that it can easily control 4 decent bomber squadrons and bring them in on a flank away from your bigger ships to attack some of your enemy capital ships. This is really, really awesome. Now, if you instead would like to have a small attack from your GR-75, you can upgrade to the combat retrofits, which gets 1 blue die on the front arc, and also it changes its anti-squadron die to a blue anti-squadron die, which means more range for attacking enemy squadrons. Now, this is one really to take, in my opinion, if you are playing Torn Far on another ship nearby, because then getting to re-roll those if you've rolled, the accuracy on the die, because the accuracy is going to be useless in those situations. You want to just get the hit. So being able to re-roll an accuracy is really useful, and suddenly then the combat retrofits would be actually worth the extra points to be able to get 1 attack on a capital ship and 1 attack hitting some enemy squadrons, which would be actually quite decent. A lot of people forget you can still attack out of 2 different arcs with the combat retrofits. 1, you can use that 1 blue die on a capital ship, and 1, you can attack some squadrons. Don't forget that. Don't forget your anti-squadron die for the combat retrofits. And you know what? I love this flotilla. It's a fantastic flotilla. Both versions are great. I've used them quite a bit. I use them in pairs when I use them because of how cheap they are. And that is why they have made it all the way down to my number 6 favorite Rebel Star Wars Armada ship.
Number 5.
My number 5 favorite Star Wars Armada ship for the Rebel faction is a ship that has fallen in my estimation a little bit because they kind of nerfed it with the rules upgrade, but it's still a great ship and I still love it, and I still use it quite often when I play Star Wars Armada. It is the Nebulon B. Now, the Nebulon B, there are 2 versions. You have the support refit and you have the escort frigate, and both are equally good, but for different reasons, in my opinion. Some people like one more than the other, but they're both excellent. Though it is the escort frigate that received the nerf. It used to be, in my opinion, the clear better version, but now it's kind of come back down and is now sort of roughly equal for different reasons with the support refit. So the support refit only has 1 squadron. That's one of the big differences, but it does have 3 red dice in the front with 3 shields up there. Only 1 shield on the sides with a red and a blue die. But it's pretty fast, can go up to 3, though usually I play these fairly slow because I want to keep them angled. I usually move 1 or 2 increments on the measuring tool to keep angling them at the enemy and keep the enemy in my front arc where I have more shields and more firepower. Now, the big things to give to this are Salvation, which is one of its titles, which says, while attacking a ship from your front hull zone, your crit hit icons count as 2 damage instead of 1. Now, that's pretty awesome because also, if you notice, this is not something that's triggered as a crit effect, which means you still get to do critical damage if you've knocked all their shields off and hit them in the hull. So you get an extra damage to help knock all the shields off, and then you can still do the crit effect. Now this pairs very nicely with turbo laser reroute circuits. So turbo laser reroute circuits, again to remind you, you spend one evade token to be able to change one red die to either a crit icon or an icon with 2 hits on it. So now the crit icon is what you want to go to because you've already got salvation. You've got those 3 dice coming at your enemy from the front. One of them you get 2 hits, one of them you get 1 hit or an accuracy, the third one's a miss. You take that miss, you turn it to a crit. Now it's another 2 hits for that enemy. This can be absolutely devastating, especially if you double arc them and after you did all this damage, you then hit them with now another red die from the side, which then just has another random chance to possibly do 1 or 2 damage to your enemy. This is fairly affordable for actually a lot of firepower. It is a total of 6. This build that I just read out to you is a total of only 65 points, which is not bad for a fair amount of firepower. Now, it does have its vulnerabilities, especially in the side with only 1 shield on each side, but still, for its point cost, I really like this ship. Now, the other version is the Nebulon B escort frigate. Now, this one gets its squadron raised up to 2. In addition, it raises up its anti-fighter shot to 2 blue dice, whereas the support refit only has 1. Now, what I like to throw on this specifically is the Yavaris title. When you do a fighter command, each squadron that you activate can choose to only attack, not move. So you do this when you're already got your fighters that you're controlling engaged with your enemy. And they can choose to only attack, and if they do, they get to add an extra die to their pool. This can be absolutely brutal and make it a ship and group of fighters that your opponent wants to avoid, because if you can get in close with, say, like a bunch of fairly decent close-range ships that maybe have black dice or blue dice, and getting to add an extra black or blue die to those pools, those can be really deadly. Now, this is the part that got kind of nerfed, because it used to be they got to attack twice, which was insane and was overpowered, and I have to admit that. But one thing I really like to do with this is I'll take a bunch of X-Wings. We use blue dice, which are fairly decent to get an extra blue die, and I'll take Torin Farr, which only costs 7 points, and she allows you to re-roll 1 blue die. So you get, a bunch of blue dice. Now at this point, like 5 blue dice for every X-Wing squadron, and one of them that you did not like the way it came up, you can re-roll. This can be quite deadly for only 69 points, only a little bit more expensive than the other build I just told you. For all these reasons, I like both of these versions of the Nebulon Bs. I think each one has a title that feels like it was custom made for this version. It fits with it so well. And they have, they have one other upgrade, one other thing that you can give to this version that makes it really, really cool. And you don't really need to give it anything else. Just these 2 upgrades still keep it, not super cheap, but fairly affordable. You have one, I don't usually take both, but you'll take one or the other in your fleet, and it can be actually a fairly deadly, more affordable ship to back up something bigger and more expensive, like one of the MC-80s or MC-75. And for all those reasons, the Nebulon B is my number 5 favorite Star Wars Armada ship for the Rebel Alliance.
Number 4.
My number 4 favorite ship for the Rebel Alliance in Star Wars Armada is a ship I like to use as my command ship when I am playing a swarm fleet. Tons of smaller ships. I love to play tons of smaller ships against the Empire, who usually just has a few fairly large ships, and make them, really feel like they're boxed into a corner surrounded by tons of little ships and they don't know who to shoot at. And this is the Pelta. Now, specifically, I will take the modified Pelta class command ship. This is a really decent ship to be your command ship, because it's fairly affordable for a ship with decent amounts of shields and a lot of firepower for not a very large ship. You've got 2 command, 3 squadron, 4 engineering. It's got 3 shields in the front, 2 shields on the side. In the front, we got 2 red dice, 2 blue dice. On the side, we got 1 of each of those. It's a fairly good amount of firepower. It is fairly slow. It can only go up to 2, the second rank on the measuring stick. But it's really decent for then commanding the rest of your fleet. One of the great reasons why it's so good for commanding a lot of smaller ships is that it can take one of those lovely upgrades that affect the entire fleet. So the two things I like to do with it are either intensify firepower, or sometimes I will also take shields to maximum. Now I do like intensify firepower more because shields to maximum is kind of a defensive ability. It helps to give back your shields to all of your ships, but I do feel like if your opponent can concentrate fire on the smaller ships, they're probably going to bring them down in one turn. So I find that the intensify firepower, making each of your ships really dangerous, letting each of them change one die to a face with a hit icon on it and no other icons, getting you just one extra hit for each ship, especially if you have a lot of ships. Using Admiral Mon Mothma, I've been known to take as many as 6 or even maybe sometimes 7 ships in a fleet commanded by the Pelta. And when you have intensified firepower spread out amongst all those ships, it can be absolutely insane. So that is really, really awesome. Now, some great upgrades other than the intensified firepower. I like to take expanded hangar bay with this one because it's already got 3 squadron command, and I like to give this ship a bunch of squadrons to help defend against enemy squadrons coming in. Because usually if you're taking this many capital ships, you're not going to have a huge amount of squadrons. But if you have enough that you can intercept your enemy squadrons, maybe with some cheap ones like some headhunters, you know, the Z95s, those are really good for intercepting enemy squadrons and tying them up while you deal with enemy capital ships. Another great one to take with this ship is Ramus Antilles, because of how the fact that he can help you gain extra tokens and bank them even when you are using the dial, which you're going to want those tokens to be able to use the intensify firepower just about every round. So Ray Antilles really works well with the intensify firepower. I absolutely love the Pelta command ship. It's one of my favorite ships to be a command ship in one of my favorite fleet styles for Star Wars Armada. So for all those reasons, the Pelta command ship is my number 4 favorite ship for the Rebel faction for Star Wars Armada.
Number 3.
My number 3 favorite ship for the Rebel faction for Star Wars Armada is another of my favorite command ships to take. It is the MC-75. Now, the MC-75 is based off of Admiral Raddus's ship from Rogue One, which is awesome. He flew an MC-75. There's 2 versions. You've got the Ordnance Cruiser, which is really cool, and you've also got the Armored Cruiser. Now, they're both really good, but I generally prefer the Ordnance Cruiser, mainly because of the difference in firepower. So the Ordnance Cruiser in the front arc has 2 blue dice and 3 black, and on the sides has 3 red dice and 2 black. Now, the thing about this version of the cruiser is you want to get point blank. You've got a lot of black dice, and having 5 dice each in the front and the sides make this a great ship for multi-arcing your enemies. So this is a great ship to take specifically the title Profundity on. Now, Profundity is the one that lets you zip in another ship like point blank to it. So what you usually do with this, because of how freaking awesome it works, is that you get in point blank and you use the Profundity to pull in, you know, like a Hammerhead cruiser to just show up. If you can do it right, you can have the Hammerhead show up in the rear arc of your enemy. But in addition, while it's firing at the rear arc of the enemy, the MC-75 itself is unloading with all those black dice and hopefully double arcing its opponent. So some upgrades I love to give the MC-5 Ordnance Cruiser with the Profundity titles. I love to give it external racks so you can cheaply throw a couple of extra black dice on one of those hits, as well as Assault Concussion Missiles, which gives you the crit on black ability that says you can exhaust this card and each hull zone adjacent to the defending hull zone suffers 1 damage. That means you literally get 2 extra damage for the crit effect, which is insane. In addition, with all of that black dice shenanigans, I like to give it Ordnance Experts, which says, while attacking, you may reroll up to 2 black dice. All of this on an Ordnance Cruiser with Profundity is insane, and if you double this up with using Admiral Raddus, you can even do some shenanigans where you pull in an extra ship or even pull in the Ordnance Cruiser itself, and then it pulls in a Hammerhead. I have done things like this in the past. It's tons of fun. It can be really crazy to do. Another configuration I like to do with the MC-75 cruiser, specifically with the MC-5 Armored Cruiser, which is more of a long-range version because on its flanks it has 3 red dice and 2 blue dice, is I like to take it with Admiral Akbar. So I had briefly mentioned this earlier when I was talking about the assault frigates. So I'll take Admiral Akbar on the Armored Cruiser, and the reason I put him on this rather than the MC-80 cruiser with the ship he actually was in the movies is because even though this has one less die there, this version of the ship can take the upgrade gunnery team, which means it can fire twice out of the same side. Whereas the MC-80 version with the big side arcs with one extra die in the side can't take gunnery team, and that's a real issue. Plus, this version being cheaper than that MC-80, actually for roughly the same cost, you can take the upgrade that gives you one extra red die in each of your side arcs, and you know what? It's roughly the same cost as that version of the MC-80 anyway. And then you put Admiral Akbar on it, and you're going to wind up with 6 red dice hitting twice from your flank, and then again you're backed up, of course, by your 2 assault frigates, which is a really, really cool, fun build, and a great title for this version if instead of 2 assault frigates, maybe you take 1 assault frigate and you take, say, a MC-30, is you could take the Mon Calamari Exodus fleet to be able to keep this ship alive and really make it very defensive. Another great thing to do with the MC-75 armored cruiser when you use it with Admiral Akbar is to give it the title Aspiration, which allows you to move some of the shields around. Since I usually start sideways with it because you're going to just hit broadsides and whatnot, I take most of the shields off the right side if I'm facing the right side, so I'm providing the left side to my enemy, and I put them on the left side of the ship to really beef up the shields on the left side and make it even tougher to bring down. The MC-75 armored cruiser is really awesome for this. It works really well with Admiral Akbar, and it's funny that it actually works better with him, in my opinion, than the ship that he comes in and the ship that he used in the movies. But I love taking the MC-75 armored cruiser with Admiral Akbar and a pair of assault frigate Mark IIs. It's really, really a brutal build and can be pretty freaking awesome. For all these reasons, the MC-75 cruisers are my number 3 favorite ship for the Rebel faction for Star Wars Armada.
Number 2.
Moving right along to my number 2, we have the CR-90 Corvette. Now, the CR-90 Corvette is one of the cheapest, most affordable ships for the Rebel faction, not including flotillas. But for a very cheap price, you get a fair amount of firepower and a lot of speed. This thing can get all the way up to the full 4 movements on the range ruler. Now, the CR-90, there are 2 versions. You've got the Corvette B and the Corvette A. The Corvette B is loaded with blue dice. 3 blue dice on the front, 2 blue dice on the sides, 1 on the rear. It's got 2 shields on the front and sides, 1 shield on the rear for hull. Very affordable at only 39 points. Now, the Corvette A has 2 red dice and a blue on the front, 1 red and blue on the sides, 1 red on the rear. This one is a little more expensive at 44 points, but still a super affordable vehicle. Now, these ships can be very affordable. You just throw a couple of fairly affordable upgrades or titles on them, not really risk too much on them because they can be fairly fragile and you don't want to put too many points in them. But they can be a really great distraction and in some cases a really great surprise for your enemy. So for instance, one of the things I like to do is I like to give Dodonna's Pride to the Corvette B, who has all those blue dice, because it gets that blue crit that says, cancel all attack dice to deal 1 face-up damage card to the defender. Now, generally I will do this when I take General Dodonna, who of course allows you to look at a couple different cards before choosing which one to give to your opponent, so you can pick and choose what nastiness your opponent has to take. Now, what I'll also sometimes do is I'll give this ship for 8 points the modification high capacity ion turbines, which says the battery armaments of your left and right hull zones are increased by 1 blue die. So now if you can double arc an enemy, you can hit them with 2 arcs of 3 blue dice each. If you can't double arc an enemy, hopefully you can hit 2 different ships with 3 blue dice each. And again, with both of those, if you get a blue crit, you can pull off the Dodonna's Pride effect. And if you're using General Dodonna, you can choose from a couple different ships. This can be a really great way to zip around behind your opponent's lines and start dealing out cards that can negatively affect their fleet and really mess with them and really distract them. Now, another thing I want to talk about is that there is a wonderful title called Jaina's Light, which says that you can ignore the effects of overlapping obstacles and your attacks cannot be obstructed. This is another great title to throw on a Corvette B, and a really cheap one to just give it that and nothing else. For if you're not using General Dodonna and you don't want to use Dodonna's Pride, this is a very cheap way to just have a ship that can maybe fly around and take objective tokens and maybe fly around behind your opponents and harass them, and that can also be really awesome. Now, if you're taking the Corvette A with its red dice, a title I like to give to the Corvette A is the Tantive 4, which says before you gain a command token, one friendly ship at a distance 1 to 5 can gain that token instead. This can be a great way to feed command tokens to other ships, and it's very cheap at only 3 points for the title. Or you can give it Liberator, which allows you to take one of those lovely upgrades that affects your whole fleet. The only downside of it is that you can't use a token to do this upgrade, so you have to actually discard the upgrade. You're only going to get to use it once. But at only 2 points for the Liberator, it's a very affordable way to throw an upgrade out on the Corvette if you're not taking any other ships, like say the Pelta, that could normally take an upgrade, to do a one-use concentrate fire or a one-use shields to maximum. Can be a really nice trick that your opponent doesn't see coming. It's a very affordable way to get one of those out on a cheap ship. Your opponent's concentrating on your bigger ships, and then you're just like, ha, this turn everybody's concentrating fire. How awesome is that? For all these reasons, the Corvette B is a very versatile ship. The Corvette A and the Corvette B, excuse me, the CR90 is a very versatile ship. There are lots of ways to use it. And for all these reasons, it is my number 2 favorite ship for the Rebel faction for Star Wars Armada. I very rarely take a fleet that I don't have at least one Sierra 90 Corvette. They're great.
And now it is time for number 1.
Okay, finally, my number 1. Now, you may be really scratching your head and wondering what is my favorite ship, and it's going to be a weird one, and I know this might be a controversial pick for some people, but I love this ship. It is the Hammerhead. The Hammerhead is a dirt cheap, absolutely dirt cheap ship. The Hammerhead Scout Corvette is 41 points. The Hammerhead Torpedo Corvette is 36 points. These things are dirt cheap. Now, they are fairly fragile, and they don't have a huge amount of firepower, but there are some very specific uses, 2 in particular, that I like to use them for. So first off, it depends on whether I'm making a fleet where I'm only going to use 1 or whether I'm going to use either 3 or 4 of these. This is literally how I would think of it. Now, if I'm only going to use 1, often if I'm going to use the trick where I'm bringing them in with the profundity, what I will often do is I'll have the Hammerhead Torpedo Corvette with its confetti dice in the front. It's got 1 red, 1 blue, 1 black, and then 1 black on each side, and that'll be the one I bring in because then I'll just equip it with external racks for 4 points, so one of its shots can get an extra 2 black dice. And Grail's Honor, which says when you overlap an enemy ship, the enemy ship suffers a face-up damage card instead of a face-down damage card. So I'll bring this into the rear of an enemy ship, I'll fire on it with a lot of black dice, and then I'll ram it and cause it to take a face-up damage card. This can be really brutal. And sometimes I'll also take this ship when I am playing with General Dodonna, again, for the face-up damage card shenanigans. Now, whenever I'm playing the Mon Mothma fleet, which I like to get as many small ships in as possible, I will take 3 or 4 even Hammerhead Scout Corvettes. I will play these guys at 1 speed. I'll move them fairly slow, and I'll do a gun line with them because they have 2 red dice and 1 blue die in the front, 1 blue die on the sides. They're fairly cheap and only 41 battle value. And what I do is I just give them a single upgrade, which is the Task Force Organa title. It is 1 point per ship, bringing them up to 42 points only, which is why you can afford 4 of these. And it says, while attacking, you may choose and exhaust a copy of this card on another friendly ship at distance 1 to 3 to re-roll up to 2 attack dice. While this card is exhausted, you cannot attack ships. So you attack with your first ship, you don't do any rerolls. But from then on, every ship exhausts the previous ship's card, and it can re-roll up to 2 attack dice. This makes those 3 dice in the front suddenly absolutely deadly. Being able to hit at long range and getting 2 chances to possibly get either the crit symbol or the double hit symbol on the red dice is awesome. You wind up getting a lot of damage, and I do mean a lot of damage. I have had times where 4 of these ships will do ludicrous damage while like concentrating fire on an Imperial Star Destroyer and just tearing off its shields until the point where my opponent, who underestimated them, will be like, holy crap, how did you do all that damage with little ships? I said, because I have 4 of them. And the thing is, there'll be maybe something a little bigger like a pelta, and he's trying to concentrate on that. But while he's trying to concentrate on that, he's getting absolutely obliterated by the Hammerhead scout corvette. Now, the thing is, there is a downside to these things. One is that they have no attack in the rear arc. The other is that they only have 1 shield on the rear, 1 on each side, and only 2 in the front. They do have a decent 5 hull, but of course, shields are better than hull. They're easier to replace. If your opponent starts concentrating fire on your Hammerhead scout corvettes, they can be taken down pretty easily. That said, you don't mind when you lose 1 42 scout corvette. 42 points is nothing in the grand scheme of things, and these things are wonderful cannon fodder, and it's why you can field 4 of them in one fleet, along with like two or maybe even 3 other ships. If you're taking some flotillas, you can even fit in 3 other ships. I've had occasion to do that, which is insane. But yeah, I absolutely love the Hammerhead Scout Corvette. So let me know what you think of my decisions in the comments down below. Let me know what your top 10 list would be, or what your favorite ships in the Rebel Alliance fleets would be. Of course, there were a few ships that did not make my list. But that said, I like all of the ships, and I would use all of them. Specifically, just to note, the ships that did not make my list today are the MC-80 Assault Cruiser or Command Cruiser, which is, of course, the version of the MC-80 that Admiral Akbar uses. I have very limited times when I like to use that because of the fact that it cannot take the gunnery team, so it can't fire twice out of its side. So I do feel like it doesn't work as well as a ship for Admiral Akbar as the MC-75 does. And also the Providence class carrier. As much as I like it, it's still very limited because they don't have any titles for it. So I do like it and I have used it, but I don't like it as much as the other ships in this list. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my top 10 list. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Kaptain. That's Kaptain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.